Summer weather comes slowly to San Diego, what with May gray and June gloom. But to the surfers in the early 60s, the end of school signaled a change in their migratory search for surf. Well, first off, when school was out, girls in bikinis started showing up at the beach daily. And, well, there's a normal shift in the swell direction, favoring more the southerly direction, and that favors the beach. So that's where most of the guys went, except for my friend Gator. He preferred to surf where there were fewer people, and that's where we find him. In this story, I call Surfing the Cliffs Summertime. Well, Gator had packed up his backpack with his diving gear, and he had his longboard. Well, in those days, all boards were longboards. He had his longboard under his arm, and he headed off down towards the cliffs, down those dirt trails and to the steep cliff that, well, the last portion, you had to actually lower your board down and then climb down the little footholds. Hopefully someone had left a little rope there that you could hang on to and not tumble to your demise. But Gator made it down, and there was, alas, little to no surf. So he set his board there along the edge of the cliff, and then he walked along and went out with his fins and mask and his snorkel in search of abalone for dinner. And he dove down into a cave, and there he spotted two shells, two cowrie shells that he'd never seen before. Why, the mantles were covered with purple spots, and he instinctively grabbed them off the cave wall. As when he surfaced, why, the mantles retreated inside of the shell, so that all that remained was a kind of a gray shell with a white streaks. And interestingly, he heard in his mind, there were no words spoken, but he heard in his mind the words, these, my brother and I, are the only two royal cowries in these waters. Please put us back, or there will never be any more. And Gator just instinctively dove down and pressed those two cowries back against the wall of that cave. And then he surfaced and swam back to the beach. He sat there on the beach, he lay down and he pulled the warm sand around his body, and he just thought about what that reef was like in wintertime, when the swells came from the west and the waves piled into that with some of the best right-handers in all of San Diego. Well, he just said, I wish it was at least 3 or 4 foot now. And no sooner were those words out of Gator's mouth when he looked out towards the kelp beds. And out there he could see that there were some ripples in the kelp. And they were slowly advancing towards the reef, where they built and they broke, and they were perfect 3 to 4 foot waves. Why, it didn't take Gator many minutes, and I would say probably seconds, to grab his board, put some wax on it, and begin paddling out. He paddled out through the channel, and when he got out to the takeoff spot, he could see that there were bits of seaweed and foam where the waves had broken. He sat there for just a few moments, and then he looked out towards the kelp beds outside there, and he could see some ripples building, and he waited right on the little boil spot where the rock is closest to the surface, and that's where the wave will break. And he sat right in that perfect spot, didn't have to worry about anybody else being there. And he took off, and why? The wave just lined up in front of him. He dropped down and made a big turn. He came up, up to the top of the lip, and then he was able to move forward, walking, cross-stepping up to the nose of his board, and he rode across the face of that wave, right on the tip of his board, hanging 5 the whole way, until he got to the channel, and the wave kind of backed off, so he made a nice big cut back, and then another little turn, and he pulled out into the channel. Wow, Gator thought. That was special. That was about the best wave I've got all summer. So he paddles back out, and there's more waves. Gator's confidence is gaining, wave by wave, set by set. And he's trying every maneuver that he's even ever thought of or seen all the pros try. Why, Gator is in heaven. He sits there and he thinks, be nice if it was a couple feet bigger. And sure enough, the next set came, and Gator had to turn his board and paddle out farther because he knew the wave, when it was bigger, it would break farther out. He got himself into the right takeoff spot. He knew where it was. He lined up with a spot on the cliff, and he put his head down and he started paddling, and sure enough, that wave just picked him up and he dropped down to the bottom, and he banked a big turn, and off he was. And the thing just stood up, and he stalled by stepping back just enough on his tail of his board to make it slow down, so that then the wave, the curl of the wave, would throw out over the top of him. A tube ride, they call that. And sure enough, Gator came squirting out through the outside of that, through the white water. Whoa, the grin on his face was so huge, mostly broke his lips. But there he was, so happy and so confident, and he looked around and he goes, whoa, I would even share a few of these waves with some of my friends, but paddle back out. Sure enough, he only wanted a little bit bigger, and there it came. He saw those ripples out there in the kelp beds, and he started paddling for the farther out to catch those waves, because he knew they were going to break farther out. In fact, these were going to be about as big as this reef could hold. Otherwise, the whole wave just piles over at one time. Well, there was nothing to be done, but Gator spun his board around, stuck his head down, and started paddling to build up that board speed so he could get not only into the wave, but down the face before it broke. And he did. He stood up, and when he did, the whole bottom of the wave just basically dropped out from underneath him, and he dropped down free falling. Well, it felt like free falling. And then his fin caught, and he turned, and just as he turned, the whole wave just collapsed in front of him and pushed him down and down. And he scrambled back to the surface, gasping for air, and, well, there, floating next to him, was about a 3-foot section, the nose of his board. Gator grabbed that broken piece of his board, and he pushed it and swam in. The waves, as fast as they had come up, they went down. He got to the shore, and there was the other half of his board. He took both halves and he went up and stuck them up against the cliff and sat down in the sand, pulled that warm sand around his body, and just thought about what had happened. "Hey, Gator, what you doing?" He looked up and there was Hugh and Shoo, two of his pals. "What happened to your board?" "Oh," said Shoo, ever sarcastic, "I suppose you caught a 5-foot wave and it broke it, huh?" Gator didn't say anything. "Oh," Gator finally spoke. He said, "No, I was coming down the cliff and I dropped it and it broke." And from that day on, it was known as the summer day when Gator dropped his board at the cliffs and it broke in two. That was everybody except Gator. For Gator, it was the day that the surf broke at the cliffs in the summertime, and only he was there to ride it. Thank you very much.